Hello, welcome back to some more Perils in Paradise Hearthstone card reveals. We're going to go through this one a bit quickly today for Hunter, not because I hate Hunter, but I want to watch the England match in about 30 minutes, so I'm on a bit of a time limit here. Hunter, by the way, we have seen none of the cards. We didn't know exactly what to expect from them. We are aware that Priest tours in Hunter, and we saw the tourist for the Priest card going into Hunter is Chillin' Vol'jin, a card I think is actually pretty bad. By the way, I've had some insight now that this card can't select itself as one of the two minions. It was basically, imagine a minion that can do damage, like it says Battlecry deal 2 damage. You can't select the minion you're playing on the Battlecry, so this has to hit 2 separate minions, which I think is a bit of a tall order. However, I do think that there are some Priest Hunter archetypes out there, spoilers ahead, that will actually be pretty good, and therefore you'll have to run Vol'jin. So even though I think Vol'jin is pretty bad, I think you will run him regardless. Anyway, we also know that Hunter is going into Warrior Land, and we know 2 cards from Warrior. The Rye Cleaver was recently revealed officially, and Char was unofficially revealed about a week or 2 ago. And this kind of implied that the Warrior package might have some sort of hand buff type effect. Let's start off with the hand buff type effects then. Ranger Gilly, this is the Warrior Tourist from Hunter. 6 mana 4/6. At the end of your turn, get a 2/3 Crocolisk. Death Rattle, give all minions in your hand +2/+3. Wow, that's actually kind of a cool little effect. And funnily enough, right now, in Standard, Handbuff Paladin is one of the stronger decks out there. I'd probably argue it is in the Tier 1 region right now, especially since the Druid nerfs have occurred, aka Splish Splash Whelp has been removed from the game, and it's killed the deck very well, by the way. It dropped it from like a 60% win rate to like a 48, so yeah, anyway, there's been like this mad dash to get to the top of the meta again, and Paladin is doing very well with this hand buff archetype, so we know it can work. In the past it hasn't worked though. We're going to have to see what Warrior has to offer though for this full hand buff package to see if Ranger Gilly is going to work particularly well. Obviously this is a nod back to like the OG classic 2-drop River Crocolisk, but it improves it to some degree because not only do you get the 2/3 Crocolisk, if Gilly dies, it will actually be a 4/6 Crocolisk for 2, which is obviously really good value for money. Also, it gives you some more idea of what you might want to do with the Rye Cleaver. Maybe you play the Rye Cleaver, you get 1 slice of the bread. On the future turn, you play Ranger Gilly, you start generating these Crocolisks in your hand. Eventually, Gilly dies, it buffs all the minions in your sandwich, you break the Cleaver. Then you have a sandwich full of these Giga buffed minions, and you just play the sandwich. And hopefully that is enough value on that turn to win the game. Personally, I think that is a bit of a pipe dream. I think it's a little bit too slow, but if there is a good enough reason to hand buff your cards in Warrior, Gilly will see some play. Also bearing in mind that because you're in Hunter, you could put Yelling Yodeler into your deck and just get this giga hand buff for 1 turn where you get +4/+6 to all minions in hand thanks to Yelling Yodeler plus Gilly. It's a 10 mana combo, not very good stat line for the 10 mana combo, but not absolutely terrible. And we are seeing currently in the Highlander Warrior deck, they're still running 8 mana 2/4, which obviously lets you win the game eventually. That tempo swing, or the lack of tempo swing, I suppose, you're giving it all to your opponent, it's still not brutal enough to kill that deck. It's made it a lot worse, but it still sees some play. So paying 10 mana to get, +4/+6 to a bunch of minions in your hand, and play 7-10 stats, isn't the end of the world, especially when you have to be aware that Ranger Gilly, you sort of want to kill this guy, because he is filling their hands with these Crocolisks. And eventually they're going to get really toothy and really horrible. And yeah, that's going to be just a miserable experience. Also, any hand buff deck right now has always got a chance of working, simply because Leroy Jenkins exists in the set. Public service announcements again for the Hearthstone team, please take Leroy out of the game. There is no place for a neutral charging minion. For reasons I'm going to explain later, because we're going to see it again, but you could potentially get a really big amount of buffs on the Leroy Jenkins and just one-shot someone. You always have that fear versus hand buff Paladin that if you're, 18 or 22 health or there or thereabouts, Leroy might come and get you, so I can definitely see some sort of hand buff type deck working with Hunter. Anyway, we're going to put this to one side because there isn't actually much else on the hand buff support side of things exactly from the rest of the Hunter cards. We also got revealed earlier in the day this catch of the day. 1 mana 3/3 beast, Rush. Battlecry, summon a 2/1 worm for your opponent. This card is really, really good. It often sounds like a big nod back to something like Marstrake, where it's a obviously overstated for the cost card, but has a big downside in the fact that it summons something for your opponent. Now, Marstrake gave a 2/1 poisonous guy to your opponent. That's obviously horrible, you have to deal with that, and that's kind of how the card was balanced. 5/4 in stat lines is sort of more like a 4-mana effect. You sort of had to spend a mana to kill the 2/1. If you could do that for 0, then the Marstrake was obviously really good value. And people did use Marstrake, like they'd play multiple Marstrakes, for example, and then do a 1 damage to all across the board, and then basically cheat out the Marstrake value. This being said, Catch the Day, I'd argue that Marstrake currently is like 1 mana off where it could see play in Standard. Basically, if this is a 4 mana 5/4, it wouldn't see play in Standard, but it would be a reasonable card. So it's like a half a mana or thereabouts below where it should actually be for the effect that is obviously demonstrably bad. Catch the Day, 3/3 minion with Rush. That is definitely more than a 2 mana minion. That's like a 2.5 mana minion effect, so you actually get like 1.5 more mana bang for your buck. And actually, even if you trade into the 2/1, you still have a 1 mana 3/1 Rush. That would see play in some decks in Standard now. And that is the worst case scenario for Catch of the Day, so I actually think this card is really, really, really solid. Especially bearing in mind, you might want to put this into your tokeny Hunter deck, you play a bunch of Catch of the Day, you swarm your board full of beasts. Jungle Gym is the perfect location just to kill off these pesky little worms, and then your opponent doesn't get the value anymore. Like, I seriously think this is a very good card for your zoo-based token Hunter decks. We also have Pet Parrot. 2 mana 1/1 beast. Battlecry, repeat the last 1-cost card you played. Note for ahead, Hunter has got this 1-cost card synergy as well. That's one of their packages. We've seen parrots, we've seen macaws, we've seen squawkers, I think, in the past. All of these parrot-based cards that repeat some sort of effect again. And actually, a lot of them end up being really good, or at least they can be abused in some way. I say recently, but about 1.5 years ago, Grey Sage Parrot was in my favourite deck, or one of my more recently favourite decks, I suppose, of Big Spell Mage. And that was a tier 1 deck. It was a really, really solid card. And it's basically this idea that sometimes you would like to put more than 2 of a card in your deck. You might want to put 3 in your deck. Obviously, with legendaries, you might want to put 2 legendaries in your deck instead. Maybe you want to put 4 or 3 for the case of the legendaries. And these repeatable parrots give you the opportunity to do this type of thing. Now, obviously, Pet Parrot is at the lower end of the scale in terms of disruption. You're not repeating a 6 or more cost spell. You're only getting a 1-cost card, and that might be, your Catch of the Day. By the way, this says repeat, not play, so I think you actually get the Battle Cry off this as well. So if you're playing any 1-drop with a Battle Cry, I think it will go off with Pet Parrot as well. But yeah, if you do play, Catch of the Day on turn 1, you trade it into the Worm, you have this 1 mana 3/1. Next turn you play your Pet Parrot, you get another 1 mana 3/3 into a 2/1, you might trade it in again. You're still getting this aggressive stat line, and if you have any way, aka your location, of killing the 1 health minions, you could generate a pretty big board fairly quickly, which is very nice for the board buffing token deck. So I think both Pet Parrot and Catch of the Day could see play in this token deck. I also think Pet Parrot is more likely to see some play in the Priest Hunter deck. And this is Astral Automaton Priest. Now, you may have noticed this deck isn't being played anymore. It was fairly recently before the last set rotation, but not anymore. And the reason for that is that Animate Dead rotated out. And simply you can't generate enough Astral Automatons anymore to beat your opponent down with. Pet Parrot is Animate Dead again, basically for all intents and purposes. And actually might be better than Animate Dead, because the problem for Animate Dead in the Astral Automaton deck was you couldn't run any other minion that is 3 or less. Otherwise, Animate Dead would hit it, and you really just wanted your Astral Automatons to be resurrected. Pet Parrot has a more refined niche. The pool is smaller. It is the last 1-cost card you played, so as long as you only play 1-cost Astral Automatons in your deck, or you're careful about the ordering, you will always get an Astral Automaton from this. It is 1 more mana than Animate Dead, but you get a 1/1 body on top of it. I will also come back to say about this, and it's funny how cards work. on paper, Pet Parrot is actually a really bad card. A 1/1 stat line is normally something you would see on a 0 mana minion now. And repeating the last 1-cost card you play is obviously worth like 1 mana, yet bundled together it's a 2 mana card, but it's just funny how things work that there are going to be 1-drops that you would want to play more than 2 copies of, and therefore Pet Parrot will actually see some play, even though the valuation of the card itself is probably not very good. It's basically the set will make the card. Anyway, more of that as we go on. More avian themes. By the way, this is a very avian themed set for Hunter. We have Bird Watching. 2 mana spell, discover a minion from your deck. Give all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. Big reminders of something like Pendant of the Earth. This was also discover a minion from your deck. Instead of giving, +4/+2 stat line, if you find a minion that you have a 2 of in your deck, or in your hand, or if the other one's on the board, because you get it anywhere for the copy. That 4/2 stat line is kind of worth about a 2 mana effect, in my opinion, which is actually really good on a 2 mana, Bird Watching. Basically, discover a minion from your deck. It's free, and that's very good value. I think on the Bird Watching side of things, if you only hit 1 minion, which you might want to do, you might want to hit, Leroy Jenkins, for example. I think if you hit 1 guy, it's basically breaking even, which I think is to say that it's a below average standard card, but sometimes you might want to hit this 1-off card if you're really desperate for it. Anyway, Pendant of the Earth does see play currently in Druid. It is a 3 mana spell that discovers you a card, and instead of getting the +4/+2, you restore health to your hero equal to its cost. Now, you could get a 10-drop from this and restore 10 health, in which case, like, the highest of high you get from Pendant of Earth is higher than what you'd get from Bird Watching. You get about, for 1 mana, 5 healing or something along those lines, so if you, extrapolate upwards, you're getting more bang for your buck, probably, than you'll get from the +4/+2. That's very consistent. However, I think, unlike Pendant of Earth, which could, in theory, have, a really low, you could avoid that. Bird Watching is a bit more consistent than the Pendant. And it's 1 mana cheaper, so I really think Bird Watching is a very, very, very solid card. There's a couple of reasons to use this. There is a package in Hunter right now that isn't really seeing any play, I have to admit, of give your minions more attack, they get more of an effect type deal. For example, Bovine Skeleton, the Twisted Frostwing, Spurfang. If you got Bird Watching onto a Bovine Skeleton, for example, it gives the other Bovine Skeleton +2, which means you'll get the resummon on the Bovine Skeleton guaranteed. That's a reasonable effect, right? Similarly, on Twisted Frostwing, you'll get more bang for your buck from the Chimeras, and Spurfang, you'll get more minions for the cost, if you do that. Obviously, as I said, Bird Watching on Spurfang, though, you're going to only hit the 1-off, so I think there's a bit more of a risk. It also could see play in this hand buff deck. Again, we're not really fully aware of what this is going to be, because we've not seen all the warrior cards. But if this hand buff deck is really a thing, you might want to Birdwatch a minion. Maybe you want to put it into your sandwich, for example, in the future. Get the stats on the minion in your hand, and then buff that future with Gilly as well. I can see it seeing play in all of these decks. I also think where it's actually going to see its most, devastating play is actually in a deck with Freebird. Now, Freebird is a minion that has neutral charge, and therefore people were really scared of it. It's never really come to fruition, though. 4 mana for 2 attack, basically, because that's all that you really care about on a charge minion, is kind of prohibitively expensive. Now, Freebird gets better and better the more and more birds you play. A lot of classes struggle to meet that criteria. You're kind of in the territory of only being able to do it with Priest and Rogue. Hey, would you look at this? Priest is touristing in Hunter, so in theory, your Priest deck could put in Freebird along with some of these nice Hunter cards. Priest has Creation Protocol that gives you a way to copy your Freebird. You have Power Chord Synchronizer. Not only gives it more attack for a charger, gives you another copy as well for, future Freebird plays. Shattered Reflection adds more Freebirds to both the field and to your deck, if you want to set off even more comboing. Also, I'm just going to let you know for what my imagination is cooking right now with Freebird Priest Hunter deck. You could use Cattle Rustler. Why would you want to Cattle Rustler the Freebird? Firstly, it's a nice tutor, right? It's always nice to tutor the most important card in your deck, especially if you're a combo deck and you would want to tutor for a certain combo. Cattle Rustler gets Freebird and reduces it to 1 mana. What package does Hunter have? Also, what package does Priest have? They have a Narain Soothe fancy into Twilight Medium, which could also get you a Freebird that costs 1. Priest also has a 1-drop package. Pip could copy the Freebirds in your hand, the 1-cost Freebirds this is, to set up Disgusto hand combo. You could also then use Pet Parrot to repeat the last 1-cost card you played. By the way, it's repeat, so you get the battle cry, so you'll get the plus stats. I legitimately think there is some world, and I've not run the numbers yet, or how many cards this would take for your hand to do, where you're going to try and discount your Freebirds down to 1 mana. You're going to copy them, and you're just going to machine gun off all these birds, and the Freebirds will just start charging into the face. Your Pet Parrot's going to get copies of the Freebirds. And I think legitimately this might be a strategy. It's going to be more of a control-y base deck. Obviously, I think it's going to be more of a combo deck. And I haven't put the list together, but I can see it being a thing. If England weren't playing later, I would put it together, but sadly, I haven't had the time. You guys can do that. Also, to, push this idea of the archetype, it might not even need to be a 1-turn combo. What if you use Sasquatch, or Sasquatch even, sorry, the new Hunter legendary minion, 7 mana 4/5 beast, Battlecry, repeat each card you played last turn. Alright, Hunter has Shudder Block, or Shudder Walk even, sorry. Now, Shudder Walk obviously did every single Battlecry you played that game. Sasquatch does every card you played last turn. Now, importantly though, unlike something like Murozond, it says repeat, not play. So you will get the battle cries on these cards. And that is really crucial, because one of the things that is disadvantageous about Murozond, and Murozond was a really good card by the way, Shudderwock was an incredible card. For Murozond, you would lose the effect of the battle cry, but normally Murozond was worth more than that just for the stats you would get. Sasquatch, why do I keep calling it Sasquatch? Sasquatch gives you the battle cry as well. Now, it will be randomly assigned, but that's still really good value potentially, especially if you're going to be using this to repeat your Freebirds, for example, which will get the battle cry on the Freebird. And you could quite easily imagine you playing 6 or 7 Freebirds in a game. That is really, really frightening if a Freebird comes out as a 4 mana 9/9 charger, or even a 1 mana 9/9 charger. Even scarier. You'll probably still play this in your Astral Automaton deck as well. Obviously, you don't need to worry about the Battlecry on the Astral Automatons, but just the idea of it being another board refill, potentially. You play a bunch of your copied Astral Automatons, you have this giant board of minions. You're playing against a control deck, for example, they clear your board, you just drop Sasquatch, and suddenly a bigger board emerges. I can definitely see that being a thing. Also, it's been confirmed that this works with Minion Sandwich. If this sandwich-based hand buff package is a thing, you play your giant sandwich, huge board, your opponent maybe clears it, you play Sasquatch, get another board from big minions. And actually, another world where I can see this being play is in any of the Highlander decks. Because, can you imagine how toxic it is to play Reno Lone Ranger, and then on the next turn play Reno Lone Ranger again? Well, don't imagine anymore, you're going to see it, because I think this will see play in the Highlander Hunter deck. Hell, I might put this in Highlander Priest if I could. Maybe not, because normally the Highlander Priest deck you would want to not have a battle cry on it. They normally want to have Death Rattle because it works better with their Highlander payoff card. Maybe though you play this as Hunter Warrior. We'll have to see what the Warrior set is all about. But yeah, I think this is a really, really strong legendary. I don't think I've touched the surface of either of the stuff you could do with this card. And then finally for this combo-y package, and I've left this to last, we have a location, Parrot Sanctuary, 2 mana 3 durability location. Your next Battlecry minion costs 1 less. After you play a Battlecry minion, reopen it. It's kind of like Fairy Tale Forest, but a little bit shit. Again, this is on paper though, a bit like the other parrots we talked about earlier. Fairy Tale Forest is 1 more mana, you get the deduction on the Battlecry minion, but you get to draw a card with it. Now, you do also have 1 less durability, so when I said I think it's a little bit shit, I kind of like Fairy Tale Forest because it could shooter for something as well. Parrot Sanctuary, when you really think about it, is 3 mana deduction for 2 over multiple turns. This is if you don't play the reopening side of things. Now, this is where obviously you could point out to me, you're probably going to try and do the reopening. I think if you don't do the full reopening of this, like, aka you use it 3 times in one turn, I think the card is actually just bad, because anytime you cheat mana, but you don't get the payoff for multiple turns, it kind of diminishes the value you're getting from it, because you're not doing anything over those turns. You basically have played a 2 mana do nothing, right? And then you don't see the 3 mana benefit for multiple turns later. And realistically, at that point, people are more capable of dealing with a mana cheat of 3 mana on a turn than they were on the turn you played the Pirate Sanctuary. So yeah, I think you want to play all of the durability in one turn. Obviously, a good way of doing this is with this Freebird into Pet Parrot combo. You play your Pirate Sanctuary on a previous turn. Basically, you're setting up a combo where you've spent 2 of the mana early on. You get onto the turn where you want to combo, you play your Pirate Sanctuary. Freebird is suddenly 3. You play Freebird. Your location opens. You play, the Sanctuary again. You play a Pet Parrot. Obviously, in this scenario, you wouldn't get the Freebird effect. But if you could discount a Freebird down into, the 1 region before you started the combo, maybe you could set up some way of getting 3 mana cheat this way and ending up in lethal. I think the numbers actually work out a little bit awkward for this, because it's hard to get Freebird to 2 mana, which is kind of where you would want it for the Pet Parrot comboing. Also, Pet Parrot would hit Pet Parrot then, which is another slight issue. And I don't know what would happen when that happens. I think the game might just explode with Hearthstone spaghetti code. So, again, if I wasn't so busy, and by busy I mean I'm going to drink beer and watch England later, I would try and put together a reasonable combo for this, but I think there will be something here with the Pet Parrots and the Freebirds for the Pirate Sanctuary. Obviously, in the Astral Automaton deck, where they don't have the Battle Cries, I actually think this card won't see any play in that package. But as a general rule of thumb, I think... Oh, I'm skipping ahead. I forgot one more card. There's one more card in the 1-cost package. My bad. It's the Weapon Trusty Fishing Rod. 3 mana 1/2 weapon. After your hero attacks, summon a 1-cost minion from your deck. This is another one of those cards which, again, on the basis of the card itself, is actually kind of bad. Cheating out 2 1-costs is sort of like a 1 mana... Sorry, it's a 2 mana effect. It's actually maybe slightly less than that because you don't get the Battle Cries on these cards. And when you boil down what the mana worth cost is a 1/2 weapon, that's actually pushing the Rogue Hero button. But the buttons are normally slightly more expensive than the card quality because the buttons are reusable over the course of the entire game. So I actually think this is slightly undervalued in some sense. However, where it's going to see value is just because of the quality of the card itself. And that is basically in the form of tutoring out stuff like Catch of the Day. This won't play the Battle Cry, by the way, so it literally is 3 mana 1/2, do 1 damage off the weapon, break the durability, get a 3/3 with Rush. That's pretty good. Where I actually think it's more likely to see some play is in the ability to tutor out Adaptive Amalgam. Before we really went into the full set reveals for cards, I always thought Adaptive Amalgam would work pretty nicely in Hunter. Hunter has a lot of enchantments. They have the bunch of bananas, they have Yormonger, they have the Painted Canvassaur, 10-gallon hat, Saddle Up, and they have more, like the Chameleon effect thing. So you could give this thing giga buffs. It'd be really nice, when this gets shuffled back into the deck again, that you just use your Trusty Fishing Rod, attack to get it back. And actually, I think that's what will be used with this card. I don't think you'll necessarily use it just to tempo out 1-drops. I think it's going to be used more as a tutor to get your Adaptive Amalgams back into your hand again, to replay them to get more value off the Adaptive Amalgam. So I kind of see that as its own little gimmick. You could also use this in a secret package as well, potentially to draw your Costume Singer, which then will draw you a secret. And in general, you could get Miracle Salesman from it, but I think that is starting to get a little bit weak for the quality of the weapon. Anyway, as I said, I keep jumping the gun. There is another meme package you could do with this Trusty Fishing Rod. You could try and do some sort of Zoo Priest deck. I mentioned this with Brain Masseuse and Purifying Power. There are some other token buffing cards in Shadow Ascendant, Ship's Chirurgeon, and then you could add to this again, Catch the Day, to maybe swarm out some very cheap, pretty well statted minions that you could in the future silence and zoo down your opponent. I think that is a bit of a pipe dream, though. However, I think actually another place where this will see play is in the Astral Automaton deck. It's a nice way to cheat your Astral Automaton out of your deck. You could then use something like Power Chord Synchronize to copy it to make sure you always have one in your hand, which then the ones you get into your hand eventually you can accumulate and pip the potent of them to get more copies of it. And eventually, after playing, a ton of 1-drops, you play your Thirsty Drifters as well and cheat out even more mana. So I think that will actually be a viable package. Other things you could do with this card, the final thing before I actually get to what I kept trying to say before, you could do some really memey shit with Narain's Soothe Fancy, and you guessed it, Twilight Medium. This is a 1-cost minion from your deck. If you run no 1-cost in your deck, and you just set up this Twilight Medium combo with Narain, and let's say you get the top card of your deck to be a giant boy with a bad death rattle, battle cry even, you could cheat them out on turn 6. You play your Trusted Fishing Rod, before 6. You play your Narain before 6. Hopefully you get something like Deathwing, the Destroyer, or Beach Whale at the top of your deck. Your Twilight Medium, you play it, you swing with your Rod, and you're guaranteed to get the 1-drop minion at the top of your deck. And basically you'll cheat out a 12-12 or a 4-20 with Taunt. I think this is a bit of a meme-based deck. It's too many specific requirements for it to come off. But if it ever does go off, it's actually really, really disgusting on turn 6 to potentially play out 17, 18 in stats, or, 9, 26 in stats. Did I say 7? I meant 17, 18 in stats. That is actually, backbreaking for most decks. So, yeah, maybe people will try to do that. You could also just generate a big lad as well. Something like their factory assembly bot as well would be pretty backbreaking for a lot of decks. It doesn't have this detrimental battle cry, but you're still going to get another 6-7 from the factory assembly bot. And any way you shape it, cheating out a lot of big stats early on, decks can't deal with that. So yeah, I can see that being some sort of tested thing. Anyway, the thing I keep mentioning, I actually can really see this Priest Hunter deck forming. I think there's going to be 2 variants of it. One of them where you're going to run the Astral Automaton, one where you're going to try and run the Freebird Charger. They will both run most of these cards. Joymancer Geppetto, by the way, I've just mentioned here, is a pretty nice tutor, though, for the Astral Automaton. Not the tutor, sorry. It's a pretty nice copier for your Astral Automaton deck, because not only do you get the Astral Automatons that you've played throughout the game from it, you'll also get Pet Parrots. They're 1-1, so I fully expect to see Geppetto in that deck. And Vol'jin is going to be in that deck because he has to be in that deck. There are some things you could do with this package plus Vol'jin. For example, if you get a giant Astral Automaton and you still got a Pet Parrot on the board, you could swing with your giant Astral Automaton, and then you Vol'jin your Automaton onto your Pet Parrot, so the Pet Parrot can then swing with the same amount of attack again. Maybe that is something you can do. Actually, now that I say this, can you do that? I don't know how that interaction works, because the Astral Automaton is an aura, not a stat line. So actually, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe Vol'jin is just bad and you just have to accept you're running a bad card in your deck. Anyway, we do have some other cards for Hunter that I feel like they fit somewhere else. We have Furious Fowls. 6 mana spell, choose an enemy, summon 2/3/2 birds with immune while attacking to attack it. Alright, a bit wordy. Basically, it's 6 mana, you get 2/3/2s, they will attack whatever you've targeted, and while they're attacking, they have immune. And that effect, I think, will persist through future turns. It's actually pretty nice. It kind of reminds me of something like Gangplank Dive, which actually did see play back in the day. That was a 5 mana 6/4 with Dormant for a turn, and then it was a rush with immune while attacking. So it was 5 mana to do 6 damage. You couldn't split it up as a 2/3 separately. Admittedly, on the Furious Fowls, you can't really split it up right. You're selecting a minion or a face, and they both go there. So it's kind of similar to being just a 6/4. Gangplank Dive was 1 mana cheaper, but obviously it was Dormant for a turn, so you didn't get the immediate effect of Gangplank Dive. And I think it's actually fair enough to add 1 mana to this to get it on a fast card. So I think Furious Fowls is actually really, really solid. Also bearing in mind these birds are almost certainly both beasts, and they could be used for tokens, so it's pretty nice if you could hit them with a Thorn Mantle Musician as well, turn into a 4/3 immune while attacking. You could saddle them up to give them even more value. But what I think this is probably going to see some play, I think you're more likely to try and put this into your Control Priest deck, and maybe you put Chilling Vol'jin in your Control Priest deck, just for Furious Fowls, because it's actually a pretty solid card. I think if this was just a Priest card, I would consider running it in my Priest deck. Yeah, it's 6 mana, deals 6 damage. It could go to the face as well for a bit more of a threat. And at the very least, you're going to probably kill whatever you're targeting, and you're going to get 2/3/2s at the end of it. Okay, that's pretty reasonable value. We also have Chatty Macaw, more pirates, more avian theme. 3 mana 3/3 beast pirate. Hang on a second. Alright, I need to wrap up quickly. Repeat the last spell you cast at an enemy. It's at a random enemy. Again, we've mentioned this before, Macaws and the parrot things are all pretty good. The ability to kind of like pseudo get a 3rd and 4th copy of the card in your deck is really good. Now, I will say, Hunter doesn't have a lot of good ways to abuse this. I would say Furious Fouls is one of the better ways to abuse it. Instead of just getting the 2 3/2s that deal 6 damage, you get 4 3/2s that do 12 damage, but it's split up as 2 separate 6 entities. They might both hit the same thing, they might hit something different. If your opponent has nothing on the board, that is really scary to push for 9 mana, 12 damage. Yeah, that's really threatening. And also it leaves 12, 8 on the board, quick maths. Unfortunately for Chatty Macaw, after that though, things get a little bit messy, because this has to be something that targets an enemy to repeat the spell, and I think the next most expensive spell, unless I'm wrong, is Kill Command. Oh, with the exception of the card we're about to say. Kill Command is the next best thing. Kill Command is not bad to get from the Chatty Macaw. It is a 3 mana 3/3, understated for a 3-drop. You're probably looking at, as long as you get like a 2 or more, like, value spell on this, I actually don't think it's too bad value for the Chatty Macaw. Obviously, the more expensive the spell, the better it is. I actually think, as a general rule for this card, if it were in some of the other classes, this would be 5 out of 5. I still think it's a really good card. It probably will see some testing, even if it's just in something like the Highlander Hunter deck, but I kind of struggle to see where it'll fit into these Priest Hunter decks, and I sort of struggle to see where I would put it into just general Hunter decks. Maybe though you'll play Priest Hunter as a control deck, or it would be one of the variants with this Furious Fouls and the spell we're about to see in the future, and maybe it's some sort of alternate win condition. By the way, in terms of actual Priest cards that target enemies, you're really struggling as well there, because Void Shard I think is probably the most expensive thing you can do. There are some other memey things you could do with, I forgot what the card is, but the Priest card where your opponent minions attack one another and any that die go into your hand. You could do that, I think, with Chatty Macaw, because it casts on enemies. Maybe that does work. I don't actually know. But either way, it's so oddly specific, I don't think you would ever do it. It's probably most likely, though, to see some play in Warrior. We haven't seen any of the Warrior cards, with the exception of Char and the Rai, Weapon, Swing, and Majinga. Actually, this with Char, though, could be pretty spooky. You play Char, you kill a minion. Let's say the Chatty Macaw gets the stats. Let's just say, for example, it gets +2/+2 on the stat line. You play your 3 mana 5/5, it replays Char's, kills another minion, gives another minion in your hand stats. That's actually really threatening, so we're going to have to watch out for the Warrior package to see just how good this card is. But if Warrior gives it, like, honestly, if Warrior gives it, like, 1 additional card, I could see you playing Chatty Macaw as Hunter Warrior, and it being like one of the big turn cards. Finally, we have Death Roll. 5 mana Hunter spell. Destroy an enemy minion. Deal damage equal to its attack randomly split amongst all enemies. I checked Twitter just before I recorded this. Zeddy says, and I'm going to trust Zeddy, because why wouldn't I trust Zeddy? He is a gentleman and a scholar. This is the first targeted Hunter destruction card ever printed. It's 5 mana to kill a guy. Obviously, it works pretty nicely with Chatty Macaw as well. You play your Death Roll, you play your Chatty Macaw, and Death Roll goes off on 2 separate minions and, plink, plink, plinks them away. There is some anti-synergy, though, because obviously when you Death Roll the first minion, the damage is split amongst all enemies, so it could hit that minion that you eventually kill, so you can sort of waste a bit of damage along the way. As an example of like how to evaluate this card, I just thought of a random average minion in Hearthstone, and I came to the conclusion that it's going to be like a 6-drop, and an average 6-drop is Sunspot Dragon. So let's say you hit this on a 6 mana 6/6. You're kind of getting the effect of Assassinate combined with Cinderstorm. Now, I do appreciate that it's 6 damage, not 5 on Cinderstorm. Neither of these cards saw too much play. Assassinate is in Standard right now and sees 0 play, which sort of implies that Assassinate might be a 3 mana type effect. Cinderstorm is probably around that 3 mana territory. It did see a little bit of play back way then, but it probably could be valued at 2. So I think the basically what I'm saying is when you combine all this value together, you do get to about a 5 mana card, and the fact it's all bundled together is probably worth it, but only worth it if you're hitting a 6/6 or better. So that's where we're at right now. If you hit the 6/6 or better, you're probably doing well with this. I will say on the flip side, are you seeing that later game for this to go off? Probably not, so I don't think death roll is going to be a thing. It's certainly meant for a more slower, later game deck. The final thing I want to mention about this is obviously it's got a really nice synergy with Rest in Peace. You play your Rest in Peace, both players summon their highest cost minions, and then you death roll their minion that came out of it. Assuming their big high cost minion also has a high attack, they normally correlate. In which case you're, for 8 mana, resurrecting a guy and maybe doing 8 damage split up amongst all enemy minions. It's almost like an Astalor-like effect, and Astalor was really good, so yeah, I think this card potentially is good in the control decks, but we'll have to see what Warrior is going to show us. At the very least, maybe see some playing Control Priest. That being said, Control Priest right now, not particularly good on the old tier list. Anyway, that is the Hunter list. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, why not leave a like, comment, subscribe. Everyone helps me out, and I'll see you again tomorrow for Warrior, I think it is. Bye!